All right. In this video, I'm going to bring up the subject of influence versus manipulation. And this subject came up, and I was actually thinking about what is the difference? Because one feels very positive to me, and the other one has a very negative interpretation for me, or rather, not an interpretation, but it creates a negative feeling for me. And I think that the conclusion that I came to is that the main difference is that when manipulation involves doing something or making somebody do something at their own expense, while influence is something that is done in a positive way, where the person makes a decision. You are influencing a decision, but in the end, the person is happy about making that decision. And I think this places manipulation on one side of the scale and influence on an opposite side of the scale. And influence is actually something that we all like. We're always influenced by people that we see, that we admire, that we can learn something from, people that create a good example for us to follow. That is influence. Manipulation is all smoke and mirrors. Manipulation is about creating an image where somebody's going to make a decision, but that decision doesn't actually have anything to do with the truth. It's rather just the illusions, the smoke and mirrors, which the manipulating person has created for you to make a decision. Whereas on the side of influence, what you would see is somebody who is influencing you by showing you reality of what is going to follow if you make the decision. But on the other hand, it's a real thing, and if you make the decision, then you're going to get the real thing as well, and not become disappointed when you realize that everything is just smoke and mirrors. So the people that are on this side, what I find is that when you're interacting with somebody who is on this side, who is influencing you to make a decision, then you almost overwhelmingly feel positive emotions for having that interaction, and you feel that you want to make the decision, like whether it's buying something or committing to anything. And then of course you have to follow your feeling, and that's actually very important. You cannot say that like feelings are not based on facts, whatever. It's just totally different things. There is facts and there is feelings. Like you can have facts that are overwhelmingly positive, but then you can have a feeling about the whole thing that's just ruining everything. So the feeling that I get typically when I interact with somebody who I know is influencing me, and I don't care, because I know that because it is the positive interaction, and I know that it is based on truth, so I can make a decision that is based on truth, and I go through the process willingly. Now, if you're on the other side of the scale, like these people are very scared. Like the thing that they're most scared of is being exposed and having all the mirrors shattered. That is their greatest fear, is having this whole world that they have built up shattered in front of them. And that is typically done by something I would call a torpedo of truth. And this video that we can watch is actually demonstrating the concept pretty precisely, exactly like I would do if I were to shatter somebody's mirrors. But of course, there are other strategies as well. This is just one of them.
After convoy SC-7 is intercepted, Kretschmer and the rest of the Wolfpack close in. And then the order would be given that...
And so what I'm saying is that I'm not saying it's bad to interact with somebody who is all smoke and mirror. And I'm not saying it's good to only interact with somebody who is who is influencing you in a positive way. Because you would be deluded if you think that all of the world is just good, and you would be paranoid if you think that all of the world is just bad. So you have to kind of accept that there is both. There is both the situations where everything is going to be smoke and mirror, and in which case you cannot. You have to play the game by the rules of the game of smoke and mirror. You cannot expect to find any truth in there, because it's going to be every single thing that you find is going to be just a mirror that you can break, and then it's gone. Whereas if you play this game, then you kind of it's totally different rules, because here you play it by being authentic, and that goes both ways as well. So you have to realize that there is both. You have to see that sometimes there could be a bit more of this, and sometimes there could be more of this. And but the important point here is that if you find yourself dealing with somebody who is way too far, like if there is too much distance from in the interaction, so let's say somebody is more towards the smoke and mirrors side, and you're more towards the authentic side, what you'll find is that the interaction can never actually produce anything positive, because the person who's all smoke and mirror is going to be fearful of engaging in the authenticity game, because it increases their chance of being exposed, and that's what they're most scared about. So there will be a lot of resistance to bring them to this side, and if you look at it from their perspective, if you want to go into this side, you will have to be playing a different game, and you will have to be you will lose a lot of the motivation that you have to support somebody who is playing this game, because things are just so much better on this side that it kind of becomes not worth it even to go to this side, unless you just want to learn to play the game with smoke and mirrors, and just see it as an interesting experience maybe to have. But what you'll find is that it's very it's quite time consuming to kind of go to this side and try to and obviously you can never make this person more authentic, because that is a long process. You can never do that. It's something they have to come to by their own willingness, I guess. And it's actually very dangerous for them to do that, because it can cripple everything that they have. Because if their whole world is built on smoke and mirrors, if you blow all the smoke and mirrors out of the water by firing your torpedo of truth, they are going to be they're going to be destroyed. So they don't want that, and that is something to realize as well, because and because of that, because they feel that, because that's what they have to go through to get to this side, you should never force them to go to this side. It's wrong to force them to go to this side. You have to accept that, there is no right or wrong here. This is just two different ways of interacting with the outside world. So if you're going to go over on this side, you have to realize that the rules are different. Everything you see is going to be an illusion of some sort. So let's see what. Let's continue watching the video.
At the right moment in the dark of night, you're free to attack, and then the pack would come in. There's a lot at stake, not simply in sinking the ships, but in creating that shock effect and demonstrating to the British that they can sink their shipping at will.
Shevka and the other commanders prepare to fire from outside the convoy.
Wir haben viel zu lange drauf gewartet.
Kretschmer has his own plan.
Einmal die Geschwindigkeit bitte.
1000 Meter.
At 10 p.m., U-99 slinks past the escorts to ambush the enemy from where they least expect it.
Kretschmer.
So you can kind of almost see that every single one of these ships is like a mirror, and normally you don't like. So basically, what the interaction ends up being about is whether like this person can trust you not to blow all of their mirrors into small pieces, and also whether you can trust that person not to create smoke and mirrors that are not beneficial for you. So it's kind of trust both ways. Like you have to, like if you're on this side, you have to be sure that if you go on this side, then the smoke and mirrors are not going to be to your disadvantage. And also for this person, it's important to see that if they go to your side, then you're not going to be unnecessarily destroying all of their mirrors that they've created. And that makes them trust you. So there can still be trust, but it's gonna be a difficult kind of trust, but it can still exist because you can have this dynamic also where you don't unnecessarily destroy the illusions that are being created, but you can only do that. It's only possible to do that if you know that the illusions are not playing to your disadvantage. And I think that particular point is important because it does create this friction all of the time. So it's very easy to if one of the people in this interaction is a bit too paranoid, maybe, or a bit too puts too much weight into something that they maybe interpret and think is true, but which doesn't have to be true, then this kind of interaction can actually explode and become very, very toxic for everybody, because then people start acting on intangible information that isn't really that has nothing to do with the relationship, and more to do with somebody's interpretation of a situation. And if one of the people starts feeling fearful about some part of this interaction, that can also become a source of a lot of friction and also danger, because things can go the wrong way because of misinterpretation rather than actual facts. So it's always there's always a risk that things can go the wrong way, and that is something you also have to take into account if you decide to go into this direction. For example, to visit, like, it's like two different worlds. So you can go into this world and you can visit this world and you can see for yourself how things work. But you have to take into account that it's also there is a certain danger to that if things start being too much of people's personal interpretation of situations. And the same thing also applies to if the person who is always playing the game of smoke and mirrors goes into the authentic world. For example, you cannot expect them to be comfortable with appearing on a live stream, for example, because that particular situation has a very high chance of exposing them and exposing all of their smoke and mirrors to other people. So they're going to be naturally scared of perhaps you live streaming any kind of interaction with them, because they are fearful that their world is going to shatter completely if somebody exposes what they're up to. So let's continue watching the video, and we'll see if I come up with anything else that I want to mention during while the video is playing.
Has this killer instinct. He is a perfectionist, so he finds a way of sneaking in on the surface into the convoy. He managed cold-blooded to sail inside the convoy and then starts to torpedo the merchant vessels.
First knowledge they have there's an attack taking place is when an explosion strikes a ship and flares start to go up. Then the escort has to react.
The Allies target the convoy's perimeter, where the U-boats usually prowl. Others in the Wolfpack are forced to dive. But inside the convoy, Kretschmer stays on the attack.
Torpedo 1 und 3, Feuer!
1 und 2, los!
It turns into a pyrotechnic nightmare. They're just sinking ships. Terrifying for the men in the convoy. Just terrifying. No one thought that they would actually get inside the convoy in the dark of night and spit death and destruction out both ends at a high speed.
In the early hours of October 19th, U-99 fires the last of its 14 torpedoes. Convoy loses 20 ships while in transit.
So there is another point that I'm thinking about, and which is related to kind of how much probing should you be doing on either side to determine where the other person stands. So, for example, if you want to determine that whether somebody is putting up smoke and mirrors on this side where things are authentic, or you want to determine the extent of which, or you want to determine whether there is any truth at all in anything that this person says or does, or anything that you see. Okay, so you have to look at what the person is doing, but suppose you cannot actually see what the person is doing, so you have to interpret everything based on what you see, and at the same time you realize that when somebody is very far to this side, everything you see is an illusion. So you have to take that into account, and only accept any information that you can actually verify about that person. But one of the techniques that you can use to get to determine where this person is if you have some information that you know that you have confirmed from elsewhere, and you kind of have your torpedo of truth, and you have to go with a full. You have to make an impact in order to get any kind of result, which would tell you kind of where this person is, if you start with small questions and you start probing and you start sort of making this person aware that you know what they're up to, what happens is that you're just gonna prompt this person to start creating a more watertight screen of smoke and mirrors, which is going to be much more difficult to penetrate in any kind of way. And it will become much more difficult for you to get an idea of where this person actually stands. So what I'm saying is that you should confront this person, and preferably maybe one-on-one, primarily, possibly two-on-one, but not publicly necessarily, but just to see where this what is this person gonna what is the reply you're gonna get. So let's say you have to confront very, very directly, and then you have to kind of watch what happens. And if you can't get any straight answers anyway, that kind of tells you that the person is basically putting up smoke and mirrors. And if they continue to do that, and if they continue to put up more smoke and mirrors, because now you shot your torpedo of truth and it has penetrated and gone straight into the core and exploded, and some of the mirrors have shattered. And if you notice that the mirrors, the person tries to desperately rebuild this all of the mirrors that have been shattered, then that tells you that this person is putting up smoke and mirrors, and that's what they're going to be continue to do. And then you can see this as the truth of the reality of the situation, based on the original assumption that in this case everything is smoke and mirrors. So you're gonna find it to be you're gonna have a hard time to actually prove anything about whether something is true or false. But at the same time, you can kind of see the patterns, the themes, the way that this person is going to be handling the fact that you've actually gone in for a straight attack, which was maybe a test attack, but nonetheless, you can back off then, and you can see, like, well, okay, so this is where this person is, and sort of we can work from there. We can kind of like this is kind of where they are. So it gives you a better idea of where they are, and then you can continue with the interaction, and then it's up to you what decision you make, where you're going to take this interaction, how it can develop. And it's also quite likely this is not an impossibility. Of course, people go from this side to this side, and people go from this side to this side. There's no, it's not that you're like born on this side and you can never go to this side. It's always fluent. Like, there's always I would say in most cases there's always some smoke and mirrors, and there's always some truth as well. So it's not just black and white. None of this is black and white. You will see that there is always a combination of both, but you have to be aware that there is both sides, and you have to kind of make up your mind about what is the one side, more towards the one side, and what is more towards the other side. But then if you're on the other hand on this side, and you want to test the person who's on this side, then you have to create, because you're working through smoke and mirrors on this side, so you have to create smoke and mirrors that are going to be kind of testing this person, whether this person is actually has full awareness of what they're doing. So, for example, you can set an invoice that is for less than the amount that you should have been invoicing, and you can see if this person sees that. So this person can respond in one of several ways. For example, they can see that you have invoiced too little, and they can tell you that, in which case you know that they are authentic. They can also ignore it, in which case it could be that they just haven't seen the fact that you have invoiced the wrong amount, which kind of tells you that maybe they don't actually have very good idea of their invoicing process. So that can be an issue in itself. But you can also see that maybe if you do this several times, and you know that this person has very good idea of the invoicing process, but still doesn't tell you anything, then most likely this person is thinking, oh, so I'm paying less for what you have delivered, and I'm very happy about this, and maybe I shouldn't actually tell you about this, but just kind of hope that you don't actually notice it. And that kind of tells you something else about this person, that maybe this person isn't actually very, very authentic as they say they are. So so there's always like ways to go between these two, and it's kind of like yin and yang of like human interaction every single day. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.